In Manhattan's wealthiest restaurants, silence fell as a disabled boy struggled to stand. His trembling hand reached for the black waitress serving water at his father's table. In that instant, a choice hung in the air, one small gesture that could shatter prejudice, challenge power, and change 3 lives forever. The chandeliers of Kingsley's, Manhattan's most prestigious dining hall, shone like 1,000 icy diamonds. Guests whispered behind wine glasses, their polished laughter never rising above the hum of the grand piano. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved with silent precision. This was a temple of privilege, where mistakes weren't tolerated. At the largest table sat Richard Montgomery, billionaire, investor, and man of iron reputation. Power clung to him like an expensive cologne, yet tonight eyes weren't on him. They were on his son. 10-year-old Lucas, small and pale, shifted nervously in his chair. Metal braces hugged his legs, squeaking faintly whenever he adjusted. Since the accident 2 years ago, he had rarely appeared in public. Tonight was supposed to be a quiet dinner, but when the piano shifted into a tender melody, Lucas's heart surged. He gripped the edge of the table, struggling upward. The clank of his braces broke the stillness. Guests stopped mid-sentence. Cutlery froze. He turned, his wide eyes seeking the waitress who had been kindest all evening, Diana Johnson. Slowly, his trembling hand extended toward her. The entire restaurant waited. Would she dare accept, or step back into the safety of silence? Diana blinked in shock. In her 5 years waiting tables at Kingsley's, no customer, let alone a Montgomery, had ever seen her as anything but invisible. Now the billionaire's disabled son stood before her, asking wordlessly for something no menu could offer. "Dignity, sir. Control your child," snapped Mr. Thornton, the manager, his voice slicing through the tension. "This is not a dance hall. Our staff are not here to entertain children." Gasps fluttered across the room. All eyes darted between Richard, his son, and the young waitress. Richard's jaw tightened. "Lucas, sit down." His command was low, but ironclad. The boy's hand wavered in the air, humiliation reddening his cheeks. For a heartbeat, Diana considered retreating. Every survival instinct told her to step back, to avoid trouble. But then she looked at Lucas. His eyes pleaded not just for a dance, but for the chance to lead, to be more than the broken boy whispered about in pity. She untied her apron, laid it across a tray, and without a word, took Lucas's hand. A gasp swept the restaurant. The piano swelled. The boy, braced and trembling, prepared to take his first dance step. Lucas's braces screeched against the polished floor as he moved, each step heavy as stone. Yet Diana did not rush him, did not guide him. She simply adjusted her pace to his. One step, pause, another step. Whispers filled the silence. "She'll be fired tomorrow," someone muttered, but Lucas's face told a different story. The shame that shattered him for years gave way to a flicker of pride. He wasn't being helped. He wasn't being corrected. He was leading. Richard's chest tightened. For an instant, the restaurant vanished. He was back in his living room, years Nago, his late wife Elizabeth, guiding their son through clumsy spins, her laughter soft. "It's not about perfection," she had whispered. "It's about connection." The memory hit him like a blow. Now here was Diana, echoing his wife's words without speaking them, following Lucas's awkward rhythm with respect instead of pity. After 3 small steps, Lucas stopped, breathing hard, his eyes bright with victory. Diana curtsied slightly and whispered, "Thank you for asking me to dance. It was an honor." The restaurant held its breath. Richard Montgomery, master of markets, breaker of rivals, was suddenly a man stripped bare by his son's smile. "Mr. Montgomery," the manager hissed, "this will never happen again. She'll be disciplined immediately." Dozens of eyes drilled into Richard. In this world, one word from him could end Diana's career. He could nod and the problem would disappear. That was power. But Richard remained silent, his gaze fixed on Diana. "Your name?" he asked finally. "Diana Johnson." "Sir." Her voice was steady, though her hand trembled slightly. Richard nodded. He reached into his jacket, slid out a card, and held it toward her. "My office tomorrow, 10 a.m. The crowd gasped. Diana accepted, eyes unreadable. Lucas, still glowing with pride, whispered, "Dad, why did you do that?" The question hung heavier than any judgment in the room. For the first time in years, Richard didn't have an answer. Sunlight struck the glass facade of Montgomery Tower like fire. Inside, marble floors gleamed under the heels of power brokers. Diana entered in her best clothes, a navy skirt and white blouse bought on sale. Around her, executives in tailored suits cast curious stares. "Diana Johnson to see Mr. Montgomery," she told the receptionist, who raised an eyebrow before calling upstairs. Moments later, she was escorted to the 18th floor by Miss Winters, Montgomery's sharp-eyed assistant. "He had you fired, didn't he?" Winters asked coldly in the waiting room. "That happens. Clients complain. People like you lose jobs." Diana smiled faintly. "And where exactly is my place, Miss Winters?" Before an answer could come, the office doors opened. Richard Montgomery stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawling beneath him like his personal empire. "Miss Johnson," he said, voice controlled. "Please, sit." He studied her silently, a tactic meant to unnerve. Finally, he asked, "Your background?" Bachelor's in Child Development, incomplete Master's in Special Education, she replied evenly. Richard's brows lifted. And yet you wait tables. I work 3 jobs: restaurant, bookstore, tutoring. On his desk lay a folder. Freedom Steps, he said. A dance program for disabled children. Yours? Diana's chin lifted proudly. Yes, I co-founded it with my sister. It's about to close from lack of funding. Richard leaned forward. I want you to work for me, not as a waitress, as a therapeutic companion for Lucas. The offer hung like a golden rope. I'll pay you 5 times what you make now. Diana's expression didn't change. She rose slowly. No, Richard blinked. You're refusing. I don't work for men who see only my skin or my class before my competence, and I don't accept money to pretend to care. Lucas deserves more than someone bought to stand beside him. Richard's voice sharpened. You'd turn down a salary that could solve all your problems, out of pride, out of dignity, she answered. And because your son needs space, to lead his own life, not another expert to control him. From her purse, she placed a card on his desk. Freedom Steps Tuesdays and Thursdays. 4 p.m. the first class is free. She turned to leave. Richard's jaw tightened. He was a man who bought everything he wanted. But this woman, she walked away freely. Wednesday afternoon. A sleek Bentley pulled up to a crumbling warehouse in the Bronx. Inside the car, Lucas peered anxiously out the window. Beside him, Richard gripped the wheel, debating whether to stay. She won't come in. Diana's sister Zoe whispered, spotting the car. Men like that don't step into places like this. But then the car door opened. Lucas climbed out, adjusting his braces, and astonishingly, Richard followed. The community center smelled of dust and paint, but laughter filled the air. Children moved across the scuffed floor in wheelchairs, on crutches, with prosthetic legs, each inventing steps of their own. Lucas's eyes widened. A girl spun her wheelchair like a pirouette. A boy with one leg hopped to the beat of a drum. Looks chaotic, Richard muttered. There is structure. Diana replied, approaching in jeans and a Freedom Steps shirt. Just not the kind you recognize. Would you like to join, Lucas? The boy nodded eagerly, though he glanced at his father first. Richard hesitated, then said, Go on, I'll be right here. As Lucas joined the group, an older woman entered, hair braided, cane in hand. Dr. Elaine Mercer, Zoe whispered. Neuroscientist. Retired from Harvard. Richard stiffened. I've rejected your proposals before. Dr. Mercer smiled. And yet here you are, Mr. Montgomery, ready to learn what your money could never buy. The music stopped abruptly. All eyes turned. Lucas stood in the center, hands trembling as he reached for the straps of his brace. Richard started forward, alarmed, but Diana touched his arm. Wait, watch. The boy loosened one brace, letting it drop with a clang. He wobbled, balancing on a single support. His face flushed, his breathing quickened, then stepped small, shaky, but fully his dot. The children erupted in cheers. Camera flashes went off. For the first time in years, Richard's carefully controlled face cracked. His eyes glistened. That's why we created Freedom Steps, Diana said softly. Not perfect steps. First steps on their own. She led Richard to a wall filled with photos of children, each labeled with progress notes. At the end hung a single empty frame. What's that? Richard asked. Our future. A full rehabilitation center. 500 children a year instead of 50. If we had support. Richard swallowed hard. His empire was built on control. But here, control meant nothing. His son didn't need management. He needed freedom. The door opened. Reporters spilled in, cameras raised. Richard's chest tightened. He had been cornered. Would he protect his pudor, his son's triumph? Mr. Montgomery, a reporter called. Is it true your foundation rejected funding this program 3 times? The room stilled. All eyes bore into him. His reputation as a cold businessman loomed like a shadow. Richard looked at Lucas, still practicing, oblivious to the tension. Then he did something unthinkable. He smiled. The hardest thing for someone like me, he said loudly, is admitting when we're wrong. A stunned silence fell. The Montgomery Foundation will fully fund Freedom Steps for the next 5 years, he continued, and build a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology of Dr. Mercer and Ms. Johnson, on one condition: complete autonomy. No corporate interference. Gasps echoed. Diana's lips parted in shock. Zoe covered her mouth with her hands. Richard Montgomery, Titan of Wall Street, had just humbled himself publicly, not for power, but for his son. 6 months later, bulldozers cleared ground for the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center. The design came not from architects alone, but from children and families. Wide halls for wheelchairs, dance floors with mirrors low enough for kids in braces. Lucas visited often, sometimes with friends. His progress astonished doctors, walking with only one light brace, sometimes just a cane. But more than that, he led, encouraged younger children, showed them their first steps, smiled like he hadn't since before the accident. Richard came. Too, he no longer gave orders, he listened. He even studied research papers, highlighting terms he'd once dismissed. At the grand opening, Lucas led a small performance. His movements were uneven, but his confidence radiated. Richard watched quietly. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore. Diana said softly, no. Richard replied, eyes never leaving his son, but he still needs me to be around. For the first time, gratitude filled his voice. Thank you for teaching me to follow. As the crowd applauded, Richard Montgomery, the man who once controlled everything, realized the greatest step he'd ever taken was letting someone else lead.